Hi everyone, I'm Madeline, and I'm going to be responding to debate number 4 today, which is the debate about U.S. involvement in the Middle East. And I've decided to specifically respond to a video by John Gardner, and he argued that the U.S. should be involved militarily in the Middle East. And I just wanted to start off by saying that, John, I really respected your argument if you're watching this, and I really enjoyed watching your video. And so this is just going to sort of be my rebuttal to the argument presented there. So John started off discussing 9/11 and how he sort of had personal feelings towards that because he actually had some family friends that were lost in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And I want to start by saying that I'm extremely sympathetic to that and think that those attacks definitely dictated the need for a response on behalf of the U.S. But my argument, historically speaking, in that sense, is going to be that our response was very misguided and not appropriate. We responded by invading Iraq, and Iraq wasn't even involved really with Al-Qaeda at the time. And so that's going to be all I'm going to say about that, because I think in hindsight, things are always easier. Hindsight's 20/20. And the bottom line is that we're there now. And so, in my opinion, the situation is more of, should we be there now or should we not be there now? And so, John discussed U.S. involvement in the Middle East as being a security measure to prevent any global incidents or conflict within the Middle East. And so, my primary argument against this is that I think it's a bit unfair to categorize U.S. involvement in this way. I think that we say that, and I think that there may be some truth to that, but it's clear by our actions that we don't do things only to promote security. We support brutal authoritarian regimes like in Saudi Arabia, and much of the instability has been created by our own involvement in the Middle East. And so I think it's been shown that our involvement's been primarily motivated by self-interest, usually oil. And so while there may be security measures that are talked about and that may be in effect, I think that our true intentions are not altogether altruistic. I think that they are very self-interested, and with that being the primary motivator, it's led to some poor decisions on behalf of the U.S. You could also argue that there's a lot of religious tension in the area, and that not all the conflicts revolve around oil. I think there's an argument to be said that religion is used a lot to mask other self-interests and gain support for certain interests. And but mostly what I want to touch on is, if you truly believe that some of those conflicts are religious, is the U.S. really the best one to be settling these disputes? Sure, we're one of the most powerful countries in the world, but there's also an argument to be presented that maybe a regional power is better suited to solve those conflicts than the U.S. is. For instance, I'll use the example of Israel. As the U.S. has failed over the course of decades now to mediate some sort of peaceful agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, there's now being questions raised whether the U.S. should step back as in that mediator role and whether a regional power should take over, who's more understanding of the cultural situations there and is able to negotiate a deal that is maybe more in the interest of those actually living in that region rather than being more Western-centric. Or you could also take the argument that maybe an international organization is in the best place to mediate those kinds of conflicts and get involved there. You can also argue that certain international organizations, such as the UN, tend to be very Western-centric, so I'm not sure that would be much different than the U.S. being involved, but it's another option. John also specifically mentioned the U.S. being protectors and creators of peace, and I think, just given what I just talked about, I just disagree with that. No disrespect, but I don't think that's true. And I think even John mentioned the never-ending cycle of us, saying of our president saying that we're going to bring home troops than just inevitably having to send them back because there's more instability. And so I think that never-ending cycle that even John mentioned himself is evidence that we don't do a very good job of protecting and creating peace in that region. If we were really creating peace, we would help them establish institutions that promoted that on their own. And you can go much deeper than I have time to here with, the quote resource curse and what everything that goes along with that. But I think if we were truly interested in creating peace in that region, we would have established better institutions by now. I mean, we've been there for a very long time. And so the last thing that John touched on was Israel and how the U.S. is kind of framed it as the U.S. being this great protector for Israel in a region where otherwise it would be attacked. And I think that that's just a very U.S.-centric view of things. Israel actually has a potential for many regional partnerships. The rise of Iran and their Shia government has really pushed many Islamic countries into cooperation with Israel. They still support Palestinians, but a lot of times they often more quietly cooperate with Israel in terms of regional relationships because Iran is obviously increasing in power, but they're sort of alone in the sense that they are primarily Shia country, whereas other Islamic countries in that region are primarily Sunni, and that's a whole divide that I don't have time to get into. But this sort of common enemy with Iran has led to Israel actually having many regional partnerships that maybe could be facilitated into a better arrangement, like I talked about earlier, than the U.S. providing Israel for Israel's security. So that's all I have to talk about today. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, John, for your video. I thought it was very well done, and I really respect your argument, and your military knowledge was very impressive. Thanks.